Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. We are at episode 80. We are nearing the century. How do you feel about that?
20 weeks away. 20 weeks goes by very quickly, as we know from all previous episodes. So, yeah, I mean, crazy to think that we're at 80 now. You know, we remember episode 1, which wasn't all that long ago, but, it's just the start, isn't it?
Hopefully we don't get struck out with an LBW or get caught out because we're so close to the ton and, we're going to be slogging away the next 20 weeks and beyond. But
absolutely.
This week's episode is a very interesting one, and it's the difference between having needs and being needy. So when I talk about those two things, what comes up for you?
Neediness being whether it's in a relationship, whether it's friendships, whether it's just the way you are as a person. Are you someone that resembles the type of characteristics where you're looking for external validation constantly, you're always kind of annoying towards the people around you, you don't really have that spine, those core beliefs, those values, you're always a bit more of a follower, and we'll dive into all of these qualities and characteristics, but are you that, or on the contrary, are you someone that has a spine, has those core values, isn't afraid of confrontation, isn't afraid to go against the grain and stand for what you believe in? That would be the other side of having needs. What do you reckon?
Everyone has needs. Not everyone's needy, though. The key distinction, though, is that people who are needy depend on others to fulfill those needs for them and do a pretty terrible job at recognizing which needs can be fulfilled by them independently versus which needs they believe have to be fulfilled by others. And I think it's this distinction that a lot of people get wrong. And I think before you get into any relationship or even picking out a new friend, there's so many warning signs you can look out for, whether someone's clingy or not. And I think there's a few other warning signs, as you mentioned, that we could probably get into. But I think the key distinction is knowing that, everyone's got needs. Everyone's got physical needs. Everyone's got emotional needs. Everyone's got social needs to some degree or, to some degree. But with that being said, how much of those needs are being expected by you to be fulfilled by others?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where communication comes into it. Are you the person that hides away from communicating your needs, or do you just keep them to yourself and hope that others pick up on them? Because that is where the recipe for disaster happens, because when you don't communicate, as we know, it leads to destruction. You expect things from others, and when things that you expect don't fall your way, you start to get agitated, you start to get frustrated, and that's where that neediness starts to come out. So it's that snowball effect of, if you really struggle to communicate needs, you end up looking quite needy.
That's an excellent point, because it's that lack of communication at the start of any relationship where you don't talk about the boundaries, you don't talk about what things you expect from the other person, that leads to an argument 2, 3, 4 months down the line where you believe that you two are on the same page, but in truth, you just never communicated what you expected and what boundaries you had.
Absolutely. Where do you think needs come to the surface when it comes to a friendship? How can you pick up on neediness in a friendship group type of setting and scenario?
It's probably quite similar to that of the relationship aspect, just minus the sex and the physical intimacy and a few other aspects. But look, what do you look for in a friend? Like, what are your needs in a friendship? For me, it's having someone that's loyal. It's someone who's respectful. It's someone who I can have a good time with. Those are kind of my needs, right? And obviously, there are certain needs I can fulfill on my own, whereas there's other needs that naturally are going to be fulfilled by the other person. But I would say the key distinction between friendship needs and relationship needs is the physical aspect. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think
on face value at least.
Yeah, face value, there's definitely that major crossover. But I think, I would just demand someone that is like always honest with me, whether it's, honesty about the good things and about the bad things, as you would in a relationship, versus in a relationship where those needs that I would expect are probably more so to do with how I guess have a relationship with myself. And what I mean by that is setting boundaries of like time alone, being independent, not always being in each other's pockets, because I think when you go through the honeymoon period and when you start falling in love with someone and you constantly want to be around them all the time, that can maybe lead to a bit of neediness when you're used to doing it all that often, especially if someone in that relationship maybe isn't used to that, but they're just agreeable to the fact that that is happening because they're afraid of fear of upsetting their partner. And that's where I think someone that is needy, well, rather, I think someone becomes needy because of that fear. They fear upsetting someone. They've got those people-pleasing tendencies, and it stems from a lot of insecurity. You're afraid to step on someone's toes. Do you agree?
I completely agree. And guess what that breeds? Codependency within that relationship. You lose your independence. You're always expecting the other person to fulfill any shortcomings you may have. And you might have this mental model and belief that when you're in a partner, they're going to fix you. Right? You get into a relationship with someone, you must
Can't be a fixer, as we've discussed previously.
No, you can't. You can only fix yourself. The only thing they can do is try and complement you through that process, which is great. And that can be quite powerful. But this idea that you can always be at the whim of your partner's, needs and that you're solely responsible for fulfilling them, that is a dangerous, I wouldn't say it's dangerous per se, but it's just a recipe for disaster. Because at the end of the day, what happens when you only focus on fulfilling their needs, you forget to fulfill your own needs and requirements. And then you start resenting this person. And what happens when you resent them, you're going to start not wanting to fulfill those needs because you feel obligated to fulfill those needs because you're thinking, fuck, if I don't do what they tell me to do, they're going to get angry at me. Are they going to want to break up with me? And you're almost now doing this out of obligation, not because you want to do something for them, right? So it's like if you're with someone and they want you, for example, to consistently be with them, right? And you haven't communicated to them that you're intentional about your own autonomy. Just like you said, like they want alone time, but your partner doesn't respect that. You're going to be sacrificing that need of yours to just fulfill their own cup. And guess what? What happens in the process? At the start, you won't mind it, but give it a few months, give it a few years, that resentment builds up. And guess what? There's going to be a big, ugly argument that comes about.
Yeah, and it can even come out in a moment where it might not be a big, ugly argument, but it might be like you get a WhatsApp text message from them saying, come over tonight, and you reply in the heat of the moment saying, nah, I already saw you yesterday. And they might be thinking, but that's what we always do.
It's our dynamic.
That's the routine. That's the dynamic. It's like, this is nothing different. Why are you acting that way? And then it bubbles over and then you end up having that ugly argument and that big discussion. And that's where, this could happen months in and typically happens maybe after that honeymoon period has just finished. And that's where you finally start to work out, okay, this dynamic isn't right because one person has been, expecting the constant seeing of each other, constant communication, and this other person actually wants a little bit more space. And because that person has been honestly gutless in communicating that need, it ends up into boiling over. So I think, you just got to set it straight from the early days. And, early days being, if you're 3-4 dates in, I think that's early enough to say, if I'm in a relationship, this is what I expect. And it's nothing to be afraid of because you will naturally get the person that suits those needs and you will accommodate those needs for them just like they will accommodate those needs for you. And if that person doesn't abide by those needs, then you're just not right for each other, are you?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And you don't have to get too personal if you don't want to, but with your ex, did you have a conversation about needs before things got serious?
Yeah, we did. That was something that we did. I think we were both very mature about that. And I don't think it ever got to a point where things boiled over about not talking about needs when it came to seeing each other, not seeing each other. I think those things were pretty not set in stone because things always change. But yeah, I think that conversation was definitely apparent from the get-go. I've been in things in the past where it hasn't been, and that's where, you end up being just not on the same page. So, you live and learn. And definitely going into my next relationship when that eventually happens one day, it's definitely not a conversation that will be shied upon because I think naturally you're only going to have respect for that person if they're willing to talk about those things from the get-go, aren't you?
I agree. I mean, I remember I had a chat about needs before my current relationship, and a lot of the things that I'm doing now, for example, that fill my own cup, are on the back of communicating those needs. Like,
Yeah.
I went away with friends for a good month a few months ago, and if I feel like I didn't clarify at the start of the relationship that, yeah, look, one of my needs is like, being around friends. It's not that that person who I'm with now wouldn't have, obliged and said, yeah, like go ahead. But it's more so it creates that almost precedent from the get-go of the relationships that you avoid. It's almost like an insurance policy, I feel, as well. Because if you're on the same page on communicating needs, you first of all respect the person more because they're honest with you, despite it being quite an uncomfortable conversation. It's like you're never going to respect someone when they're a bit sneaky with you, when they're being dishonest. But if they tell you at the start of the relationship they have a need that, for example, might, it might make you feel a bit uncomfortable or might not be what you're exactly looking for. They might tell you like, one of my needs is seeing, my friends actually as much as I see my intimate partner. For you, that might be like, well, really, like, am I on the same page as your intimate partner, like as your friends? Like, surely I'd be a bit more, like relationships are a bit more important, but they would still respect you because you've actually been honest and you're being authentic with them. And I think we speak about authenticity all the time. Another point I wanted to talk about is that needs can be ever evolving, right?
Yeah.
Just because you said that you've got specific needs when you first started dating that person or you started becoming friends with one person doesn't mean that those needs have to stay fixed. They can change and they're going to evolve as you grow, right?
And that's why it's not scary to talk about it from the get-go, because you can say to that person, these are my needs now in the early stages of us dating, but there's some emphasis on that point of being now, because it will change and naturally you would expect it to change. When you're 3 weeks in versus 3 months into dating, boy, if you're not changing, then something's going wrong, isn't it? So you would want those needs to be changing.
Exactly. And just for anyone that's ever been called needy, don't ever be ashamed of the fact that you've got needs.
Well, there's the difference, right? Being needy versus having needs.
Correct. But sometimes you might not even be a needy person, and you might be with a partner or you might be in a friendship where basic communication of your needs has essentially, you're in a situation now where you're being labeled as needy. And that's not always the case. Maybe you're with someone who can't actually fulfill those needs. They get upset at the fact that they can't fulfill those needs.
Which is fine.
And they attribute the blame towards you. But you may have not actually been needy in that case. Maybe you've never actually depended on them to fulfill those needs. But certain needs have to be fulfilled, right? Like, it's not always going to fall on you to fulfill everything independently. It's impossible. But the thing is, you fulfill what you can, and then the other things you communicate about how you could, fulfill them in a collaborative way.
Yeah, I think you'll only be deemed as needy by a partner that you're in a relationship with, or by a friend, if you aren't really reciprocal of maybe the needs that they might have, or you're not respecting how they, I guess, respond to your needs, right? That's where you will be deemed as needy. Because if I say to you, Ilan, as a friend, I would really love to see you once a week. That's my requirement as a friend. Whether it's like a 20-minute walk or go for a coffee, I require to see you once a week, and that's how I view a friendship. I think that's whatever. Whether I think
sounds like a relationship to me, mate.
That's not my need, but let's just say for the purpose of this, that is my need. But if you, on the other hand, think, you know what, like, that's maybe a bit too much for me, and I don't really respect that, and it's not going to work, that's maybe where I, with that request, might be seen as needy, because there's no reciprocity, and there's no there's no validation with that need. So when that accumulates, I think you become seen as needy. When there's discourse between communicating those needs, it becomes that sense of neediness. If I've explained that, I'm probably butchered that, but I think more so when there's discourse is, I think, when you're going to be deemed as needy.
I think for me, simply put, you didn't butcher that, but I think the main distinction is the dependence on others, right? It's this belief that you can't fulfill of your own needs, so you depend on others. And I think that's where it lies, right? Because maybe in those 20 minutes that you want to see me once a week, what are you deriving that you can't necessarily fulfill yourself? Because if you say it's like, you're one of my best mates, I want to have great conversations with you, I want to debrief, if you communicated that to me, I wouldn't think you're needy.
Yeah.
I would just think you've got a basic need in your friendship. And guess what? Some people aren't ballsy enough to actually admit what needs they have in a friendship. And most people don't. And truthfully, with my friends, I don't really communicate that because there's a bit of an underlying expectation of what needs one another has. And I think boys are just more simple, truthfully. But in a relationship, you'd be way more vocal about it because that's, way more taxing. That's way more, cognitively taxing in the sense that you're going to be communicating with this person way more than with just a friend.
You know what? I think I've just been workshopping that through my head right now because, I wasn't really too happy about how I delivered that previous answer. And I think the way in which you will be seen as needy is when those needs that you do mention to the other person, you are unable to adapt to them if they don't become fulfilled. So for example, with that example of, me saying I require to see you once a week, I think I will then be seen as needy if I then get pissed off, angry when that doesn't come to fruition. I think if you're able to adapt and you recognize that, some weeks may be different, some days may be different, but it doesn't take away from the quality of your friendship, then that's when you'll be seen as needy. When you purely look at things as like a numbers requirement, like if I don't hit these goals, then shit's going to hit the fan. That's when that person will be seen as a bit neurotic, I reckon.
That's an excellent point. It's almost based off their reaction as well, because usually when you start calling someone needy, it's their reaction at the expense of why you can't actually necessitate their needs,
well,
right?
They're generally just, when you think about someone that's needy, and we all know people that are needy, they're probably not the calmest of people, are they? I think someone that isn't needy is typically a chiller, will go with the flow, is happy to adapt to scenarios, doesn't get butthurt when things are a bit different to what they normally might be. They just take each situation for what it is, and they don't take things too personally either. I think the ones that are needy get a bit hot-headed, get a bit, stringent in their views and closed-minded in their views, and just aren't calm people. So I think, an element of just being a calm motherfucker comes into it when we think about neediness as well.
So what do you do if you're in a relationship and you recognize you've got a bit of needy tendencies, but you don't think you're necessarily needy about it? What's the tension there? Like, how do you try to almost undo your neediness, or do you meet someone who's as needy as you, so it's, it cancels out?
No, I don't think... I don't think it's a recipe for meeting someone as needy as you because, say that relationship fails, then you're both going to come out of it not being the right people going into the next relationship, right? Unless you find someone equally as needy again. But look, I think it's very rare where that would be a good recipe. I think you would need to adapt, just like any situation in a relationship. You need a compromise. You need to work with the person to work out where you can give yourself to that person and the areas in which you might struggle to give yourself to that person, and adapt to that.
But you're not suggesting that person gets rid of their needs. There's a difference between being needy and like sacrificing a specific need, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're not getting rid of it, but say it's in a relationship and you require to see that, or you don't require, but you would prefer to see them like 3-4 times a week, and that person only wants to see you once a week. I think there's an element of let's meet in the middle, and if we truly do love each other and are invested in one another, you would suspect that you'd be happy to meet in the middle and fulfill that need. Okay, and what if that's not enough? What's not enough? What if twice a week isn't enough for that person? Well, then I don't think you're in the right relationship, are you? If you're struggling to find a happy medium where you can meet in the middle, I think that's where, one person is probably being a bit too needy, and there's and there's not enough give and take. Because look, at the end of the day, a relationship, a friendship should be easy. It should be fun. It should be easy. There shouldn't be a whole lot of numbers to think about, requirements to think about. You set your boundaries, you set your things that you expect from the person. When that might not happen, so be it. You crack on with the next time you see each other. You shake hands and give each other a kiss, and you say, that's all right. Let's move on. It's all good. And when that can't happen in a relationship or friendship, and you just find yourself in constant discourse and constant challenges with that person, it's just not right for you. And I think you should honestly fucking run.
So I wouldn't call the person that leaves that relationship because their partner can't say them more than like once or twice a week. I wouldn't call that person needy. I would say good on them for actually recognizing what they want and leaving a relationship that can't fulfill that need. Because I think...
Assuming that they haven't been able to meet in the middle?
Well, if they've tried it and it's not filling their cup and they're not, deriving the same amount of fulfillment and they've given it a red hot crack, it's simply not meeting their needs. And why should you stay with someone who can't fulfill a basic fundamental need? And I reckon in a relationship, you're going to get into this tension at times where you're going to start recognizing which needs are fundamental to you versus which needs can actually be compromised on.
Yeah,
and I think that's a really good exercise that you can go and do, because the thing is, what fundamental needs might be for me might not be fundamental needs for you. And I think if you're in a relationship with someone, it's always good to have that conversation of what's like a deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
Because if your need is having Thai food at least once a week, and the other person hates Thai food, you can probably compromise that, can't you? But if it's, a need to do with like physical and sexual intimacy, and you're with someone who can't do that, and that's a big part of your relationship satisfaction, well, there's nothing wrong with leaving that relationship for another relationship where you can fulfill that need, because that's going to be a greater determinant of your relationship success over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's just about giving things a crack. If you're not trying, if you're not trying to compromise, trying to meet in the middle, or you have and you've worked out that it's actually just not working for you, yeah, I think you've got free reign to then say, look, this isn't working for me. It's not filling my cup at the end of the day, which is what we've spoken about. The element of filling your cup should be enough to determine whether, you're happy in that relationship, friendship, whatever it is, and willing to therefore give your best self and be your best self for that person. When it comes to friendships, when it comes to relationships though, what do you reckon are 3 key signs of someone that is needy?
I think someone who doesn't allow you to have your own alone time is one. Number 2, it's consistent need for reassurance. And number 3, even they'll do self-sacrifice in service of your own needs, because they'll expect the exact same thing for them.
That's a big point. What do you mean by that one?
So oftentimes when people are fixers in relationships, at times they expect the same thing to be done. So if I'm going to do something to try and fulfill your need, I'll sacrifice my own happiness in the process, right? Even if I'm sacrificing something I want. But at the same time, I'd expect you to do that for me as well, even at the cost of your own happiness, even at the cost of your own needs. And I think I say that sometimes in friendships as well.
Like tit for tat type thing?
Oh yeah, tit for tat. And that's where I'm talking about codependency. It's like you're sacrificing your own thing to try please the other person. You're doing something out of obligation, not because you truly want to do it for them. And you're doing it out of fear. You're doing it because potentially you lose that friendship. That's usually the root of it, right? The other first 2 points I made, like not respecting alone time, I think is a huge one. Because if you're talking about like clinginess and like things to assign for, it's usually people who are clingy that aren't really comfortable being on their own. They're usually looking for some solution in other people. They're trying to maybe distract themselves, like avoidance behaviors, I would call it. And sometimes people find avoidance behaviors in consistently being with others. And we get it, social supports are a big thing, right? I'm not denying that, you shouldn't be with friends as often as you can, but having alone time and being comfortable with being alone is important. There's a difference between being lonely and being alone. And I think people who are quite needy aren't comfortable with being alone because they don't know how to fill their own cup.
And that's where it coincides with your first point about seeking reassurance, seeking validation. Like if you're with a partner that is constantly asking, do you love me? Do you want to be with me? You're only going to push that person away, aren't you? Because you would think that like being with them, you're hopefully being the best partner you can be to them and giving them all of that love and affection that they deserve. But if you're constantly getting that question back, you're just going to feel like, well, is this person seeing what I'm doing? And you just feel like they're pushing you away. So that's where it stems back to that point of being a bit insecure. Being a needy person stems from insecurity and stems from fear of being alone, like you said, not being comfortable in your own space, in your own skin, constantly seeking that validation and reassurance. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest sign and the worst symptom of it.
And don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of time for reassurance. I think reassurance is a natural and healthy thing to do.
How you go about it, though.
It's how you go about it. Like, are you asking your partner every second, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Because at the end of the day, don't you think it becomes disrespectful?
Yeah.
Don't you think you're undermining that person's love?
Exactly.
I believe love's an action verb. And I believe that you should have faith in your partner that they will deliver on their love towards you, right? I don't think that you should consistently be asking them, because guess what? It now turns to, oh, I gotta say I love you, otherwise there's going to be an argument. It's like, obviously they love you. Why are they with you for so long, right? Are they doing things and behaviors that, are consistent with the action term of love? There's a difference though, I think, like, as you said, it's a way you go about it when it comes to like reassurance seeking. It's like if your partner's like to you, like, oh, I put on so much weight, like, am I still beautiful to you? And of course you say, of course you are, baby. Like, of course I love you, blah, 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 blah. There's a difference between that and, consistently asking for that person's love, almost as if you're scared you're going to lose them.
Yeah, that's the thing. And as a partner, as a friend, you can feel that. You can feel when that isn't just reassurance. It's when it's not just asking for reassurance, but when it's therefore cutting a bit deeper and you're sensing that this person just might not feel secure with you or secure within the relationship. And you can't fix that. If you're truly being the best person you can be as a partner, you can't change someone's lack of security. That has to be something that they work on themselves.
And you could have an open and honest conversation with them and say, look, I can see you're wanting reassurance, and I'm happy to give you that reassurance from time to time and to the best of my abilities. But I'm concerned that there's an element of this which is going beyond reassurance seeking. You're trying to get me to fulfill something I can't, and perhaps something you can only fulfill.
Yeah.
And having that, a potentially uncomfortable conversation like that is so important, because even if you're not the right partner for them and you do break up because of it, at least they can remember that parting point. Because hopefully they can find things that do fill their own cup. They find ways that they can fulfill their own needs that aren't going to be placing too much pressure on the other person, because that's the whole thing about clinginess. It's the dependence. And whenever you depend too much and you place overemphasis on dependence on others, it's going to breed resentment. It's going to breed obligation. It's going to breed this pressure that ultimately the person doesn't want to be a part of. And you said something really good. Relationships, they're kind of supposed to be easy, right?
Absolutely, they should be easy. Far out. If you find yourself constantly having to reassure, constantly having to seek reassurance, constantly having to feel the need to put a smile on that person's face, to just enjoy happy moments together, if that is at the forefront rather than just doing it all and living in the moment and enjoying the moment, it's not the one for you. It should feel easy, it should feel fun, and it should feel completely organic.
Jeremy, I think we've hammered home the point about the difference between needs versus neediness. What's your closing message for our audience?
Reflect on your friendships and relationships, and if they don't feel fun, easy, and just organic, then reflect on it a little bit more. Just reflect on it and think either how can I make it a little bit more fun, organic, and fluent? And am I trying to do that? And are they also trying to do that? And if not, if it constantly feels challenging and hard and you're unable to enjoy those nice moments together, or it's like enjoying nice moments together is like 20% and 80% is feeling like it's always a challenge to get to those good moments, they're probably just not the person for you, and you might not be that person for them. And that's okay, because not everyone clicks. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. There might just be a lack of chemistry, and that's part of being human.
It certainly is. And the last thing I want to say for anyone listening to this, don't ever let anyone shame you for having needs, right? It's okay to have needs. We're all human. It's
Have
just
to have
it's
needs.
part of our biology and evolution.
Yeah.
With that being said, see if you can fulfill your own needs first. See which needs are fundamental to you. See the needs that you can fulfill on your own before looking to others to fulfill them for you.